Good evening, everyone. How's the sound for you? Okay, good. Well, as you can tell, Diana's not here tonight. She asked me last week if I would fill in for her, so for those of you who have been around the Buddhist scene for a while, you know we have a lot of lists of various qualities and activities. And so tonight I wanted to talk about one of the lists of 8, sometimes called the 8 worldly winds, or the 8 concerns or conditions or vicissitudes. So there are 8, I'll say, conditions or energies or behaviors that we all engage in, we all experience. And they're outlined in this sutta by the Buddha called the Lokavipatti Sutta. It's AN 8:6. So it's a list of 8 things that are 4 pairs. And these are all energies or conditions or experiences that we all experience continually throughout our lives, whether we're just starting out in this practice or whether you've reached the end. They're all going to occur. So just to kind of set the stage for that. So that's why it's important to learn to recognize these and see under what conditions they arise and how we relate to them. How are you going to relate to these things that are going to be, a ubiquitous part of your experience. And I realized I picked this topic based on something that Tanya Weiser told me. And then as I went and I looked at talks in the recent past, I realized that Tanya has given 5 talks about these last month, and Gil gave a whole series of talks a couple weeks ago. So if what I say tonight doesn't exactly click with you, there's plenty of talks on Audio Dharma about the 8 worldly winds. So I'll start off by describing them. The first pair are gain and loss. So this refers not only to physical things like money, resources, possessions, but also relationships, right? Our family, our friends, co-workers. We gain new family when somebody gets married or has a child or something like that. And then we lose people from our family, right? Death is a part of life. So there's continual gain and loss on the realm of relationship, friends. Sometimes we gain new friends, and other friends may move away, or you may have, some rupture in the relationship with a friend, and things change that way. So gain and loss can be seen all the way from, the very monumental gains and losses, like losing a friend or a parent to death, to very subtle gains and losses. As I was thinking about this today, I was driving to have lunch with a friend, and I think there were 4 stoplights between my house and the restaurant. And at all 4 of them, I hit the light wrong. I got to one just as the left turn light turned red. And normally I would have just, kind of mumbled under my breath or something like that. But I thought, oh yeah, this is loss, right? I lost a couple minutes because I have to wait for the whole cycle to go through. And then one light was with me, so I felt like I gained a little bit there. So this gain and loss experience can occur at many, many different levels. And oftentimes it goes unnoticed, right? You don't notice that that something's being gained or something's being lost. But it can color our experience. So that's the first pair to look at, is gain and loss. The next pair is described as fame and disrepute. Now, probably most of you don't use the term disrepute. I don't. But so it could be fame and disgrace, or fame and insignificance. Or instead of fame, you might want to use the word status. So, fame and insignificance. Who doesn't want to be the center of attention? To have the spotlight on them, to be recognized, heard, celebrated. Like right now. Maybe there's a famous person going by. And then the opposite of fame or status can be either disgrace, in which you're still getting attention, but it's sort of a negative attention, right? It's attention that you don't really want, or most people probably don't want. Or insignificance, not getting paid attention to. You're kind of out there on the periphery of the crowd, or in the corner. And I imagine we can all recognize having experienced fame and disrepute in our lives, sometimes in a major way, sometimes in a minor way. I think for me, one of the times that I remember, the earliest I can remember in my life, was my senior year in high school. Either last or second to last day of high school, we had an awards day, where, everybody went into the gymnasium and they had a stage set up. And the head of the math department got up and announced that this year, all of the awards being given in mathematics were going to one person, and it was me. And, I walked up there and I got a prize and, I don't know, a little certificate or something. And this was many years ago, before being a math geek had any, cachet to it at all. It's just like, so I sort of was famous, but only to a handful of other people that actually saw that as valuable prize. But nonetheless, there is value to being recognized, to being heard, to being valued. And it can also push us around, can also influence how we act and talk and experience our lives. And the same with its opposite, if being disgraced or being marginalized. And then the fourth pair of worldly winds are pleasure and pain. And I don't think that I could even enumerate all of the possible kind of pleasures and pains that you may experience, both physical, right? Like when I got here this evening, I went in the kitchen and I found that there was some dark chocolate. And so that was, that was pleasurable. But if I ate the whole bar, it probably wouldn't have been so pleasurable, right? It's kind of, it has its pleasure has its limits. And same way with pain. Most of the time we avoid pain, right? It's not something that that we want to welcome in. On the other hand, if you practice anything, practice sports, you may find that you need to work hard enough that some pain arises. Or if you've been injured, I've had a number of experiences where I've had to go through physical therapy. And, in physical therapy, I don't think there's any physical therapy that you can do that doesn't involve some degree of discomfort or pain. It's just, you have to see the value of experiencing that to decide to go through it. So, these are the four pairs. They're all things that are, prevalent in our experience all the time. So, why, if we can't avoid them, if this practice doesn't lead to the end of these 8 worldly winds, why talk about them? So here I'm relying on this sutta that Tanjeff translated. And what the Buddha talks about in there is the difference between how an uninstructed mind, he calls it an ordinary run-of-the-mill person, responds when they experience these things, and how a well-instructed person, a well-instructed mind, responds to these 8 worldly winds. So I have to say, I think I'm somewhere between these two. I'm not an uninstructed mind, and I'm not a completely well-instructed mind at this point. So I'm sort of here with all of you, working on this. So the first thing about these 8 worldly winds is, do we notice when they're operating? Are we mindful? Are we clear that, praise is going on, or that blame is going on? Actually, I think that's a pair that I missed, praise and blame. So I think you get that, or praise and censure. So an uninstructed mind, first of all, wouldn't recognize that force or that wind or that energy going on. And as a result, they wouldn't see these three qualities of it, which are, number one is that it's inconstant, it's stressful, and it's subject to change. So I imagine all of you have noticed that you have a pleasant experience. You know, you might listen to some piece of music that you love, or have a wonderful meal, or get a great massage. And when it's over, right? You know, it's just that's it. There might be a little bit of lingering to it. So two other things that can occur when one of these winds is operating are hope and fear. So, for example, when gain is operating, we hope that it stays as long as possible, and we fear that it won't. You know, so there's some hope of trying to hold on to an experience and some fear that it's going to go away. Now, hope and fear on their own aren't intrinsically bad. It's good to hope for a better world, or fear can help protect us from things. But in this case, hope and fear can also get in the way of us really experiencing what's going on. You know, like if something's pleasant's going on, if we're hoping that it'll just last longer and longer and we're afraid it won't, then we're actually missing the pleasant experience. We're not fully there. So one of the differentiations between these two uninstructed and fully instructed minds is that one is going to probably automatically go to hope and fear, and the other will just go to seeing it more clearly, you know, not kind of seeing its impermanent nature, seeing its stressful nature, seeing its inconstant nature, and then just, if it's pleasant, enjoying it, and if it's painful, acknowledging it, recognizing that it's there, and not getting carried away. So the first element is to be able to be aware when these 8 winds, or one or more of these 8 winds are operating, or these 8 conditions. The next one is for the uninstructed mind. The mind can remain consumed by the wind. That is, maintains sort of stuck in it, right? You know, like if somebody's praised you, you know, and you just go, oh, that's great, yeah. And I wonder if they'll remember to talk also about this thing that I did and that thing I did, and just, you know, the mind can just latch on, try to cling to what can't be clung to. Whereas for somebody that's well instructed, their mind is not consumed. You know, They can see it, but don't get caught in the story of, what does this mean, or how can I make this last longer, or how can I push this away? That it sees it and it recognizes it and it experiences it. Using one of the words Diana uses, basically it digests the experience. It brings it in and it processes it without getting stuck. Now the third phrase from this sutta I had a little difficulty with, and it's that for an uninstructed mind, they welcome the arisen gain and rebel against the arisen loss. So there can be a way in which the mind grasps onto and clings to what it wants and rebels against, pushes away what it doesn't want. The word that I had trouble with was welcome, because in some ways I like the idea of welcoming things, So in my own mind, I realized, well, I don't think that the translation really meant welcome like be open and accepting, but more welcoming like taking in uncritically something that you really like. So the image that came to me was being welcomed by a carnival barker. Now, some of you may have never been to a carnival. I realize that's kind of an old style form of entertainment, but they have these games where there's like the ring toss and the coin toss and things like that, where there's a barker out in front that's always trying to get you to come and, come on and, try out this game. And they're always a con. They're always, they're the things that you'll never be able, that won't ever actually work. But they rely on this sense of welcoming people to their booth. So that was the image that came to me on that one. Whereas the well-instructed mind doesn't welcome the arisen gain or the arisen praise or the arisen pleasure, nor does it rebel against the opposite. So again, in reading this, it can sound a little bit passive, like really the practice is just to notice, just to not be reactive, to just notice, to recognize what's going on. And I don't think that's what this is talking about. I think it is not only allowable, but I think also necessary when things arise that you do respond to them. What's important, though, is that there's some pause, there's some break between seeing what's going on and then responding in a way with as much wisdom and compassion as you can find. So these 8 worldly winds can be responded to either in a sort of a immediate kind of knee-jerk reactive way, or you can respond to them in a more thoughtful, wise, and compassionate way. So that's, to me, the difference between the uninstructed and the well-instructed mind in terms of working with these winds. And the final result, in in seeing them, in not getting the mind caught in them, in not kind of pushing and pulling, trying to get the ones you like and not get the ones you don't like, is that for an ill-instructed mind, doesn't lead to the experience of being released from suffering. That it is possible, if you're not recognizing what's going on and developing some skill at recognizing and not getting caught by them, then you can go through life just continually reacting to these 8 forces in a way that it's sort of a never-ending spiral of suffering. The image that came for me on that was where I grew up in the Midwest. We'd often drive on dirt roads, and if it was raining and there was a rut or something, the car could get in a position where the drive wheel would have nothing underneath it, so it would just keep turning and turning and turning, and the car wouldn't go anywhere. And so you had to do something, right? You had to get out and like rock the car, or maybe get a tow truck, or something to push. You need to do something to get out of that rut. And so I think this practice, this Dharma practice, is really, number one, helping us to see when we're stuck, when the wheels are spinning, and also find the wisdom and compassion to get unstuck. And so then for a well-instructed mind, and again I'm reading from this text, you're released from sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, despairs, suffering, and stress. So that's pretty good, right? So that's I suspect that's what all of us want, is not to keep going back to the same stuck place that we've been in the past, and not get blown around by these 8 winds, kind of pushing us in one way, then another. But to be able to see them clearly and not get stuck. At the very end of this, there's this wonderful phrase, as it talks about this. It says, it talks about gain and loss, status and disgrace, censure and praise, pleasure and pain. These conditions among human beings are inconstant, impermanent, subject to change. Knowing this, mindful, the intelligent person ponders these changing conditions. Desirable things don't charm the mind. Undesirable ones bring no resistance. His welcoming and rebelling are scattered, gone to their end, do not exist. So I like this particular phrase about desirable things don't charm the mind. That doesn't mean that we reject desirable things, but we're not under their spell. We're not charmed. I suspect that probably all of us at one time or another have been charmed by something. Charmed by another person, charmed by the latest gadget, or some wonderful car, or something, some TV show, some movie, some celebrity, and at some point the spell breaks, right? That charming person, kind of cheated us out of our money, or did something. And so part of the practice is about seeing through this. There's two terms that I remember Gil using years ago. One is, what was it? That sometimes when people first come to the practice, you can be enchanted with the practice. And he said, if you're enchanted, it's important to become disenchanted. And if you're illusioned by the practice, it's important to become disillusioned. So some of these things like charm and enchantment and illusion may seem attractive, but ultimately they need to be seen through. And then the practice can lead to seeing how things are more clearly, so that you don't get caught. The other line in here about undesirable ones bring no resistance. And this, I think, for me, is a little bit harder, because, how do you not resist loss, or how do you not resist loss, or disgrace, or blame, or pain? And I think that there, maybe the important thing is that with all of these 8 winds, is seeing them as not personal. Seeing them as not personal, not permanent, and not perfect. That they're impersonal forces. And again, it doesn't mean no resistance means passivity. It's more, no resistance means no ignorance that they're going on. You can still act, but you're not acting out of pretending as though they don't exist, or through aversion or hatred. You're seeing that they're going on, but you can respond to them from a place of wisdom and compassion. So that's my take on the 8 worldly winds, and I thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm willing to take any questions or comments or objections. Here, if you take that.
Yeah, I was, can you hear me? Is it, yeah.
Sounds good.
I was at Tanya's work on these, and the review is great. Things I thought about today I hadn't really thought about before, so thank you for that. The middle way comes to my mind, though, about trying to stay in that observation mode and trying to stay in the middle way, when thinking about these things that are happening. Stay out of the rut and be careful on the high road. When these things we're experiencing these things. So that's kind of the I think strategy that I've trying to employ regarding those things, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not. So it's a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it? It's
And the problem is when you're enmeshed in it, enmeshed in the storm, so to speak. The skillful things you talked about aren't as, you can't use them as like you could if you're more balanced. So I think it's and it's hard to recognize when that's happening. When you're enmeshed in a crisis, we'll call it. I think that's the challenge, is to recognize it and then start digging your way out of it rather than making it worse. I know Gil always says, "Don't make it worse." There's a lot of resources out there that I'm glad I have, but I wish I was better at picking the right one at the right time. So.
Well, thank you. So when something like that happens, do you review it later and think about, well, what could I have done differently?
Yeah, about 10 minutes into your talk, I started reviewing something that happened today. So very, very timely. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what can happen over time is, first you recognize like a day later that you could have done something different, and then, maybe only an hour later, and eventually it's like you can recognize it in real time. But thanks. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Okay. Here, I'll let you get it.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. It was just another comment, maybe somewhat similar to your observation while talking about pleasure versus pain, and how one can, an instructed mind versus an uninstructed mind can respond. Wherein I think I kind of agree with you that maybe the interpretation or how it was presented about an uninstructed mind is more equanimous or more quiet about being pleasured versus being not happy. Whereas an uninstructed mind is said to be elated versus unhappy in the other situation otherwise. I kind of feel that it's, I just wanted to share that comment that that's something that it's okay to be balanced, and maybe that's what is the interpretation that you are also saying that, and whether happy or whether the situation is happy or not so happy, and versus an uninstructed mind where it can be like much more sinusoidal, if I can use a mathematical expression
Yeah.
for that. So which can come across as less balanced.
Yeah.
It's like to keep a equanimous temperament in either situation. And
Yeah. Well, that's an important point. But I think a well-instructed mind can experience, highs and lows. They can enjoy the roller coaster of life. It's just that they don't identify with the roller coaster. It's like, because I don't think that the practice leads to just being flatlined. You know what I mean? That equanimity doesn't mean that you don't experience joys and sorrows, but you don't get caught by them. And that's I think
Yeah.
that's
thank you.
all right. Well, thank you all. Diana should be back next Monday.